Hello and welcome to the For Her Empire podcast. I'm your host, Abby Ngauche, and in this podcast, we address the personal and the business issues that female entrepreneurs face in their day-to-day lives. My guest today is Jennifer Bilger. Bilger. Did I get it right?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah.
Yes.
Jennifer Bilger.
Bilger's correct.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, how are you today, Abby?
I'm good. So, Jennifer is a speaker and a business and sales coach. And then in today's podcast, we're going to talk about how female entrepreneurs can find their why and then learn how to use your passion to grow your business, right?
Thank you for having me here today, Abby.
Nice to have you. So, tell us a bit about you. Who's Jennifer?
Thank you. So, like you started, I'm a speaker and I'm a business and sales coach. I spend a lot of time helping people discover their why. And it's an important thing to me because I spent so many years thinking I knew what my passion was and I really had a piece of it, and that's it. So helping people understand where their true passion lies and how to really use that in their business interactions, in their everyday interactions, use it within their business that they're trying to build or create, or taking that next step in the business that they've had for a while. That's really where my passion lies, because I spent 20 years in the corporate world, and I would get really comfortable in a position, and then I would do something and say, this isn't the right thing for me anymore. And then I would move on to something else because I was still kind of defining what my true passion was.
Yes.
And you boil it down, and I really love helping people. And I worked in human resources. So human resources, we support and help people. But my passion was helping people discover who they were. And if I didn't have enough of that in a job, I would move on to something that was another opportunity. So I would spend 3 to 5 years in an organization doing great and wonderful things, but really not being fulfilled completely. I thought I was. I loved human resources, but it wasn't 100% who I was. So when I decided to launch my own business, and the funny story is, when I was starting to launch my business, I was going to be an HR consultant. And I'm like, because this is what I know, this is what I've been doing all this time. One of those things, the first 2 to 3 months, I was just like, I'm not doing, something's not right here still. I think I'm on the right path, but I'm not doing what I need to do. And it wasn't until I really sat down and said, what is it that I really have passion around? And somebody asked me what my elevator pitch was, and they're like, you're not talking about what your passion is. And as soon as I said the words I'm passionate about, that is when I redefined my business and decided what I was and what I was doing, and who I wanted to help, and who my clients were. Everything came into order as soon as I did it. As soon as I sat down and started trying to figure out what my passion was. So I focus on that behavioral side of business, helping people do the same thing now, and doing it a lot quicker than it took me to come to terms with.
20 years is a long time, though.
Yeah. So, and you know what? I loved what I was doing when I was doing it. It wasn't that I was unhappy or anything. And even when I was leaving, I was still going to be in HR because I loved what I was doing. It's just, it didn't fully fulfill my passion.
It didn't really click. Yeah.
No.
So if you did not leave, the HR position, would you still be comfortable there? Like,
yeah, I think I'd still love what I was doing, but it's one of those things that a piece of advice I would oftentimes give my managers I was supporting, or I did a lot of mentoring and coaching outside of the company I was working at, and I did a lot of volunteer time. And, I would always say, if you say I have to do something, then you're not in the right role. You should be able to sit up and say, I love to do this, or I get to do this. Even if it's something that you're not 100% happy about, you get to go to work. You get to do this today. You get to work on this project. And that's when that passion really really comes out of you when it's like you're doing everything and you're fulfilling that passion and you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. So I was giving this advice for years. Like I had been giving it to people for such a long time. And I myself would explain when I would say I work in human resources and people would be like,
Really?
ooh, I could never get a job. I could never fire people. And I'm like, well, I have to fire people so I get to do the rest of the stuff that I love to do.
Yeah.
And, and nobody wants to fire. I've
Yeah,
not really met.
I'm very awkward about that.
It's a horrible job, but it's a necessary to have someone who does this. I mean, it exists for a reason.
Yeah.
And, in the last 18 months of my corporate career, we went through a merger and acquisition at the company I was working for, and it was a really large merger and acquisition. And this is the third time I had gone through merger and acquisitions with companies, so this was not something that was new to me. I actually was hired for the position because of my experience with merger and acquisitions, because I had a lot. I had experience in laying off people.
God, is that an experience? Oh my God.
I know, and it's a horrible thing.
Oh my God.
It's horrible, but I did it with, it was one of those things where I would always tell people, I would rather have somebody who does it with compassion, be put into that role, and really takes the feelings of the individuals into account. So I would set up the room so it was as comfortable as it possibly could be for the individual that we were about to let go. I would give them time to kind of go through this. And I was doing exactly what I would want somebody to do for me if this was happening to me. And so people would say, well, you're really good at this. And I'm like, this is not the thing I want to be really good at.
No,
I really do not want to be known for this.
Like, I can fire you better.
Yeah, it was like a horrible thing. And it's just like, and everybody always asks me, have you seen that movie with Clooney up in the air? And I'm like, no, I actually will not watch that movie because I don't want to be reminded of what I have to do myself. And so it was one of those things. I hired because of that experience. I knew what I was getting into with the role. The first, I worked in the role for 3.5 years, and the first couple of years was fine. It was that last year and a half. And in that last year and a half, I had to lay off a lot of people, but hire a lot of people. And it was one of those things where I felt like it was, I just felt like something was missing. And I kept saying, I have to go to work. And I was waking up saying, I have to go to work and do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. And this is not what I wanted to do. I finally took my own advice and said, this is not where I need to be. And instead of looking for another position with another company where I would likely have to do this again.
Yes.
And because in human resources, the likelihood of you having to let somebody go,
it's pretty high.
Comes with the position. Yeah. And I kind of woke up and said, I never want to have to fire somebody ever again unless it's my decision to do so. Oh. And in human resources, a lot of times you have a manager coming to you saying, okay, we would like to let this person go.
Yes.
You have to kind of make sure this is we're doing it the proper way, and we're giving the person everything that they need to be successful. And if we've done everything, then you have to process this information. And I decided I never wanted to have to fire somebody ever again without it being my sole decision to do so.
Yeah.
And the only way that I can do that is if I had my own business.
Your own business, yes.
So what business am I going to launch? So essentially what I did after the first 3 months of kind of floundering around, saying I'm an HR consultant, and it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And what I really wanted to do was mentor and coach people being successful in some capacity. That's what I loved about HR in the 20 years that I did it. It was elevating people. It was bringing them to their potential. It was helping them figure out the right paths and opportunities for them. And what I essentially did was say, this is what my business consists of now. So I get to make people smile. I get to help them through. I get to the issues and the problems. I get to help them find the resolutions and all the stuff that I love to do. And I don't have to fire people anymore.
Yeah, that was like a turning point.
Yeah, and if I am working with a company that needs to do something like that, I can advise, and I'm not the person in the room anymore. I can walk away from it, but I can
Yeah.
get it. So, I still work in the HR world. I still work with HR professionals with a lot of different things. One thing that I loved doing was teaching people how to interview and hire people. So I still have a piece of that. But what I really focus on is helping people understand what their why is, because it's such an important thing to know for everything that you're doing. Once you really become comfortable with who you are, everything else just kind of falls into place for you. You have opportunities that come out of the woodwork for you that you wouldn't have had before, because there's something that you exude something, your personality, you just smile. Your personality smiles. It says, this is who you are, and I'm proud of what I'm doing. I am excited about this. This is what I'm supposed to do. And when that happens, it's just a magnificent thing. And to help a business owner understand that, a lot of times people think, as a business owner, these are the things you have to do. So I'm going to read, I need to bring up my revenues and I need to increase my sales. So I'm going to read the sales book. I'm going to read 20 sales books,
Yeah.
and I'm going to follow everything you do because this is successful for people. And I look at them and I say, this is really not what you need to do. This doesn't match with your personality type. This isn't who you are. So following this path it's the path to somebody else's success.
Yes.
Not,
Yes.
so let's figure out what your path looks like and what makes you so successful and what is going to make you successful and what makes you happy and what makes you passionate, and really where you can use those strengths in your business, in your interactions, and it'll help elevate that revenue and sales. It'll help elevate the message you're trying to send out to the world of what you do.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So before we jump right into how we can find out why, there's something you mentioned that you help HR consultants, HR managers figure out how to interview and hire somebody. There's a right way to do that?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what HR people do. When I would walk into the room as an HR professional, my job was to make sure we were hiring the right person. So not the person with the technical acumen and skills to do the position per se. That was the job of the manager. The manager was always, you let me know if they're capable of doing the work that you need them to do, because you're going to ask them questions around that. If they're in finance, you're going to find out if they have the Excel skills or work in spreadsheets or are able to do the finance work that's there. My job is to make sure they can fit on the team. They're going to fit in the culture. They're going to be the right person that works well with you. And there's a right way to do that, and there's a wrong way to do that. So
What's the wrong way?
the right way is to figure out how to, it's a behavioral interview is what it is. And it's not the, people say, oh, behavioral interviewing, I've been doing it for years. It's asking the right questions based on the responses. So you really have to be really understanding of what types of questions are out there and what they gain for you in knowledge. So when I teach people to do behavioral interviews, I sit down and I ask them questions, or I'll sit down with them and interview somebody with them, and I will ask certain questions, and then I will talk to the person who is the owner of the business and sit down and say, when I ask this question, what did you gain? What information did you get from this answer? And I let them tell me what they gained, and then I tell them what I got from the answer. Oh. And then I teach them to listen for certain things, certain behaviors that come out. So, the behavioral interview, people think it's like, oh, well, you have to read body language, you have to do this. It's really just opening all of your senses up to really listen to what the person's doing. For instance, I use my hands when I talk. And me using my hands gives you information about my personality type. I've got a lot of energy. I'm an active personality profile. So my activeness is going to come out, especially when I'm nervous. And you can say, okay, this is a nervous thing, and this is somebody who might be telling us something that we need to dig in more. So you kind of just pick up on those terms. I use my hands when I talk because I'm an active personality type. But if I started to do something that was more of a, I started crossing and uncrossing my legs, or I started twirling my hair a lot more.
You're nervous?
And these aren't always just tells, but yeah, it's something that you can pick up. But are they nervous, or is it just they're expending their energy?
Oh.
So you have to know how they're saying things, what they're doing. You have to put the picture together. So a real good behavioral interview takes all the pieces and says, how are they saying things? Are they really quick to answer questions right away, or do they take time after you ask the question and really put some thought into what they're saying? And then you have to really figure out, if they've done it from the start, if they've paused, if they said, oh, okay, or they repeat the question back to you, they're really digesting that information to come up with an answer, because they're more of a passive personality type. And then if they continue to do that, that's not a nervous trick, it's their personality.
Yeah.
So if they start doing something like this and you say they're a passive personality type, they're not expending energy, they're probably nervous. And so those type of things. So it's not just behavior in general of what they're doing, it's listening to how they're doing things, it's how they're answering the questions, and it's what you're gaining from those questions when you ask. So for instance, my favorite behavioral question to ask is, how do you learn? Because how do you learn tells so much about an individual. So I can do that with you if you're okay with that.
Sure. Bye.
So I will ask you the question, how do you learn?
Okay. So now, when you say how do I learn, do you mean the specific things I read, like courses and books, or do you mean do I prefer to study on my own, at my own pace, rather than have someone teach me?
Do you see what you just did?
No.
You answered the question with another question back to me.
Yeah,
and
you not clarify.
What I'm asking. That's why it's such a good question.
Yeah.
So you clarified what I'm asking, but you've given me more information for the questions I need to ask you.
Oh.
So now, okay, so what do you think? So yes, so tell me a little bit. Do you like to learn with books? So
no.
You keep, no. Are you a hands-on learner? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. I'd rather just have a course and learn as I go.
Yes. So if I was going to teach you something like, let's say we have a computer program, would you prefer to sit at the keyboard while I'm instructing you, or would you prefer to watch me and take notes?
Let's see. Which would I prefer? Let's see. I would prefer you to just give me a topic, then I try to learn on my own, and if it doesn't work out, I just come back to you and then see how you do it.
Okay. So you really would like. So if I was going to give you if I was going to teach you a computer program, seriously, if I was going to sit down at the computer and say, this is the program we use for this job.
Yeah.
You would want to try it on your own first.
Yes. Yeah.
What it is. So that gives me so much information about you.
It does. Like what?
You don't like micromanagers. You don't want somebody standing over you, watching you as you're doing it. You want to be able to come back and some information for questions. But it's such a good question for managers to ask, because they are a person who wants to hold your hand while you're doing something, and they want to really be there for every step.
Yeah.
It's a bad fit for you.
It would not work out for me.
Exactly. So it's such a good question because, first of all, it's vague enough but specific enough. Because you know what I'm trying to drive towards, but you're going to ask for clarification. And 90% of the time people ask for clarification before they answer.
Yeah.
But that also tells me about them if they're not in that 90%. Because that tells me something about them as well each time, however they're asking for clarification, or if they don't ask for clarification. So when you're looking at it and you go through this process, that's exactly what it is. So that's when you're teaching somebody to do a behavioral interview.
So much fun.
Really, That's the value you're giving. And, people are like, well, how many questions can you ask of somebody before you know they're a right fit or not? And I said, sometimes it's the first question. But usually I can do it in 5 questions or less, and usually I can do it in about 3. So I have 3 questions that I really like to ask people that give me the information that I'm looking for when I ask that question. Um, and so I teach people. So when I teach people who are managers and business owners how to do this, I actually sit with them and say, I'm going to hand you about 100 questions, but I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to walk you through an interview process, and I'm going to sit with you, and you're going to see the flow of this, because from How Do You Learn, I know what kind of questions I want to start with after that question. I know the next thing that I want based on that. Sometimes I want to drive towards, okay, really what what type of management style you're looking for, or what kind of role that you really want to be in, something about what your aspirations are, what your intentions are, those type of things. Are you resilient? Are you a team player?
What does team player mean, by the way? I really hate that word. Like, what does that even mean?
Resilient?
No, like, are you a team player? Like, you're an adult, you should play up with others. Why is that a question?
Yeah, you just don't ask, are you a team player? You ask, try to figure out. One of my favorite questions to ask is, if you were trying to help somebody else solve a problem, what kind of method would you use, or how would you try to help them solve the problem? It really tells you if they're a person who likes to drive, or somebody who wants to support and elevate team members, and how to answer that question. So there's like a bunch of different questions you can ask.
I like that.
Are you a team player?
That's an annoying question.
Yeah, and what I always tell people is, if you ask a question, like if I were to say, are you a team player?
I would laugh.
That's not the question that I'm really focusing on.
Yeah.
Once you start to answer that question, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. That's the one I'm focusing on, the follow-up question based on what you start with. So I always tell people, when you do a behavioral interview, it's always the second or third question, the follow-up questions, that get you the most information. Because if I ask you what your strengths are, you're prepared for that. You know I'm probably going to ask you that. But if I ask a follow-up that says, so tell me a time, which one do you think is your best strength? Which one do you think your weakest in? If I ask you that, that's not something you're going to probably be prepared for. And there's, which one do you think you're going to use most in this position, as we've explained it to you? You're not going to be prepared for what that is. You're going to have something that's there.
Yeah, but it's not going to be rehearsed.
And it's not one of those things that they've been coached for.
Yeah.
So when you coach people, you usually can coach them into one follow-up question, but you don't usually coach them into something deeper than that. So you really, when in a behavioral interview, you're really digging in deeper, and you're really trying to figure out if they're the right fit for you. You've probably already know if they have the technical acumen or the technical skills.
Yeah.
If you've talked to them, if they, what positions they held, you can get that information in a different capacity, and
your CV probably.
Yeah, it's such a small part of the interview though. So really what you're looking for is whether or not they're going to fit in the culture, whether they're going to hold up the values that you have for your organization, whether they're going to be a good fit for you as a manager and your style, if they're going to be able to do the work as you need them to do it, and you're really looking for whether they're going to fit with the team as a whole. So, and even if you are hiring somebody who is just going to be just your employee, your first employee, and there's not a team, you also have that aspect of, if you want to grow into a bigger team, if they're going to be the right person to grow a team with. Are they going to be, in the beginning when you're starting companies, and I work with a lot of people who start companies, you are wearing 7 to 10 hats.
You're doing everything.
And then when you hire that person, they're going to take some of those hats from you, and they're going to start wearing multiple hats.
Yes.
But you really want to make sure that you both work really well and mesh really well together. But when you start to grow that team and you say, okay, each of us should probably be wearing one or two hats now, and maybe we'll get it down to one hat eventually. When you start to do that and you're going to give those hats to somebody else, you really want to focus on, will that person be able to give those hats to somebody else?
Oh,
so they're my hats and I want them forever, And so you really kind of have to look at those things. And when you're building a team and you're really doing something, those are the things that I work on with people, especially if they're growing that team. I say, okay, let's look at what your personality style is and what your profile is. And let's look at what your employees' profiles are. And then let's figure out what's missing from having a cohesive team when you're building. So what are the pieces you're missing for this to continue to be a success story? Because right now you're wearing these hats, but what hats is this person going to be able to give away?
Yes.
And what hats somebody else to wear?
Yes.
So really, if you're really sitting there and looking at it and saying, okay, so this person's strong suit is they facilitate the meeting very well. Well, I don't need another facilitator. I need somebody that's going to be able to execute. So you really want somebody that's their strong suit.
Oh.
So when you're building a team and putting those pieces together, you understand where the gaps are and you're understanding what you're looking for. And the question I always get, so I'll answer it right now is, do you do this for people who are hiring? Will you give them a behavioral assessment when you hire based on behavioral assessment? And I always say, I will not do a behavioral assessment to get rid of candidates per se.
Oh.
So what you do is you don't give every candidate a behavioral assessment.
Oh,
you narrow it down to the top couple of people. And if you have the top two people and everybody is in love with one candidate, you hire that candidate.
Oh.
You really, and then you give them the behavioral assessment to see where they fit on the team.
Yeah.
You don't do to say they're not a right fit for the team, so we're not going to hire this person. We're going to hire the second best person.
Yeah.
So you only give behavioral assessments before you give an offer. If you have two candidates that are so close together, you need to know which one's going to fit in your team better.
Yeah.
You just think they're really close together, and you really want to know which one is going to be the better fit.
Yeah.
And so a lot of companies will give behavioral assessments and personality tests or anything like that in the beginning. And yeah, and I'm just like, first of all, I look at my clients and tell them I'm just like, don't waste your money on it. I'm going to teach you how to do this, so you shouldn't have to do it before. But as soon as you hire the person, then we'll give them the assessment.
After you hire them.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wouldn't the point be to give them the assessment before you hire them, so you know they're a good fit?
No. So they're a good fit by everything else that you're doing before the assessment. So why do you want to push them away? You just want to know where they fit in the team and where their strengths are and what they're going to add after. So once you've made the decision to hire them, and you can do it before you actually bring them in, but once you've made the decision that this is the right person, then you give them the assessment. And it's kind of a verifying the results type thing, rather than getting rid of them because they don't fit into this box.
Oh.
You really want to use an assessment. You want to understand where their strengths are. You want to use it to your advantage, not your disadvantage. Using it to your disadvantage is giving multiple people an assessment and saying, this one seems to fit best with our team, so this is the person we're going to run with. And not really
to get it.
Or that they're fitting in the rest of the boxes. The reason why I feel so strong about that is, first of all, there are a lot of people out there who do not take assessments well. So these are not as well. They give you insight, but you really have to have somebody who really knows how to read them to help you understand what they mean. So if you're just giving assessments to 10 different people and saying, okay, so this one falls into this category and that's really what we need to be looking for, so we're going to use this, you're not really sitting down with a person, making sure they fit in your culture, making sure you're just saying they fit into this profile. And you really want somebody who fits within the team culture and understands your values and is going to uphold that and is going to be a good match for you. So you want to do that after you've gone through that process.
Oh.
And like I said, it's only when you have two candidates that are really close that you do it before an offer. Otherwise, you just do it after you give them and you're happy with them. And then you find out these different things that you need to know about them, where their strengths lie, really where they're going to fit in your team best. And if they're going to fill in a gap, and if they're not, what you need to do to fill in that gap then. Because if there's a gap within your team, these are skills that can be taught usually, and you can get people who will move into that. So, and it's just a different conversation. So.
Oh. I've learned a lot. Okay. I'm a little bit distracted about the HR stuff.
That's okay. I did it for, I worked with HR, and it is true. It is a piece of my passion. It's not that I'm not.
It's very passionate. I mean, we can definitely see that. Yeah. And behavioral theory reminds me of like Criminal Minds, the series, only with less serial killers.
Yeah. Yes. It's less than that, but it kind of does some of the same things. Yeah. What I normally tell people is when you're really paying attention to somebody's behavior, you're just paying attention to them. You're picking up things that you would pick up anyways. I'm just teaching you how to focus on it in a different capacity. I'm teaching you how to understand what it means to see it. So, over my 20 years, I gave thousands of interviews. And so there's certain things that I've picked up on that I can understand what that means because I've seen it so many other times. Or I'm relating it to, the way somebody answers a question, I'm relating that to something I already have experience with. Yeah. What I'm doing is helping you gain that experience, gain that wisdom and understanding around it, and gain some of the knowledge that I have from my many interviews over the years. Yeah. So when I interview, if I were to sit next to you and interview somebody, and you pick up on, let's say we ask a question and you get 3 key points from that individual. Mm-hmm. I'm going to continue to go with that. And when it gets, and help you understand what that information is, and get you to the right point of saying, okay, this is what I picked up and here's why I picked it up. Here's what I recognize. Here's when they answered the question in this way, I could tell it was something that was more what we say is boilerplate, which is a rehearsed answer. Oh. And I say, when they use terminology like this and the rest of the way that means this is a rehearsed answer. And this is why I picked up on it. So start to focus on that kind of thing. But it's something that you just really have to have the experience of doing. But if you have somebody who's really experienced in it, they can pinpoint it for you and say, so the next time you hear something like this, pay attention to it more. Yeah. Pay attention to how they're answering the question. That you need to dig in and ask another question because you need to gain more information. And when I would talk to managers who weren't going to have me in the room with them interviewing, I would always tell them, when you walk out, they should be an absolute yes or they should be no. There's no between. If you say think maybe, or if you tell maybe they might be a good fit, you haven't done what you need to do in that interview. Oh. So you need to continue to ask questions to tell me they're an absolute yes or they're a no. And the next question people usually ask me is, can you have more than one absolute yes? And I said, yes, you can. You can have multiple absolute yeses.
How does that help you, though? You have multiple yeses.
Then we bring them back in for another interview.
Oh, yeah.
So, or they do something else. So you want to make sure, because if you have 2 people that are absolutely yeses, and that's when we can use a behavioral assessment to help figure out exactly which one is the better candidate. Because if you have 2 people who are very equal in everything, they're equal in their skill set, they're equal in everything that they've done, their experience level, everything is equal. Then you want to sit down and you want to say, okay, how are we going to differentiate between the 2? Because we only have one role. Yes. And then say, this is how we can do it. We can give them a behavioral assessment. So then we can say, okay, this one's going to fill more of the gaps, or this one's going to be better for the role that we have because of this reason. Yeah. And then, you just have to make sure that you have somebody who understands how to read assessments, because in the ones that I do, if everything's grouped really close together, that means something different to me. But if you're just reading the result of it and it says this person fits into this profile best, you're not getting all that other information from it. And I can say, if it's really grouped together, this is a time of transition for this individual. So their profile is probably going to change once they get here.
Yeah.
This is why it could be good. This is why that could be bad. Here's the pros and cons of that type of thing. If you have somebody who is extreme in one area, but under stress, they go completely opposite. I can explain what that means. So you go through this and say, you have a very high stress job. This is really where they're going to be. This is not what they're going to do. This is what they're going to do. And this is not the right person for your role. So you kind of look at it from a different perspective and a different point of view. And you start to really focus on what those things mean, and you need somebody who can help you understand what you're really looking at and what you're reading. And the assessment that I give to you is 34 pages.
Oh, Jesus! Oh, God! It's so long.
About it. It's a lot of information about.
Oh, God!
It's
for each candidate.
Yeah. So it digs really deep. So what I do is I help them understand those 34 pages mean. I help them understand how it works with their own profiles. So there's a lot that goes into it when you're focusing on the behavioral side of things. And for years I had been doing this without really having these assessments as part of it. So you would go through this process, and it was one of those things where I would ask, well, why did this occur? So when I was in human resources, if you came to me with an issue, the very first thing I would ask you is, why do you think this happened this way? And people would look at me and say, well, aren't you going to tell me how to fix it?
Yeah.
Well, first, why it happened. Why did it happen?
Wait. If somebody came to you with an harassment claim, you asked why it happened. Really?
Oh, no. Now, a harassment claim. So if somebody comes to you with a harassment claim, you sit down and you listen to what they have to say about it. You really do. So that's a little different.
I was worried.
Somebody didn't finish a project and they're not performing the task, you would ask why. But the truth of the matter is, when you're listening to the harassment claim itself, I used to work in an environment where I hired a lot of felons here in the States. We had a position where we were felony friendly.
Okay.
And I'm going to put this in the best possible way that I can. The level of education that they came in with was a lot different than working in a corporate environment. So you would expect that it's not okay to look at somebody up and down and say, baby, you're looking good today.
Yes.
Very not okay. That is something that you feel uncomfortable. It is not appropriate to do that. What I had to learn was, in this environment that I was working in, with a lot of people who had a history in working or a history of going to jail or being in prison for whatever it was. And most of the felonies that I dealt with were drug related in nature. So I didn't have a whole lot of people who had violent felonies and things like that. But you would have somebody who would say something like that, and it was something that they were used to hearing, and in the way that they were educated and their level of understanding of the situation was different than somebody else. So you had to understand who you were dealing with. When I worked at that position, I worked there for about 4 years. And in that 4 years, I probably did close to 400 sexual harassment investigations. Jesus. What I learned was,
Jesus,
you had to ask certain questions about this. Like, I would literally, my investigations went something like this. Somebody would do a complaint and they would say, it was a laundry facility.
Okay.
Somebody was bending over to get the towels out of the basket and put them in where they needed to go. And somebody would walk by and say, hey, baby, that looks nice. What do they would make a comment.
Oh, it's so cringy.
Somebody complained to me, the person who heard the comment, and then I would sit there and I would say, okay. So I would bring the person in who made the comment, and I would ask the question, did you say? Yes.
What the hell? At least deny the claim. What the hell?
Okay, you realize you just admitted that you're harassing
Someone.
individual. And what I had to learn was the next question had to be, well, why do you think that's okay? Well, I would get answers like, well, that's how my grandpa talks to my grandma.
Okay. A different issue we need to unpack. Like a different issue to deal with.
That is not how my grandpa talked to my grandmother.
When it comes to the grandmother, that's me.
And so you had to understand that. You had to teach them. I would have to get up once a quarter and stand up and say, these are not appropriate things to say. Because it was a felony-friendly place, I would lose about 10% of my staff a week. So I was constantly having a huge turnover.
A huge turnover.
Half of 100 people, I would have pretty much a turnover of about 80% within 2.5 months. It was my bottom 10% was always leaving.
Oh my God.
And my bottom 20 to 40% was always leaving. So for some reason or another, they could get arrested again. I had people get arrested all the time,
Oh,
you know, because they had work, you know. There were many different reasons why people would leave, you know, from this position. It was minimum wage.
Yeah.
They could go down the street and make 10 cents more an hour, and they would, because it was more money for them.
Yeah.
And you know, so this was a high turnover position. So once a quarter, I would have to stand up in this location with people laughing and giggling at me all the time, because I would have to say, these are phrases that are not appropriate. If you are saying these
inappropriate workplace behavior,
them while you're at work. And I would have to say things like that, like, this is not a workplace. And so you have to really understand who your audience is, what you're talking about. And yes,
you're living in a drama.
And a lot of times, harassment claims, I would look at them and say, please don't say this anymore. This is not appropriate. Then I would get up in front of everybody and say, all right, we had a recent harassment claim. This is not appropriate to say, you know. And sometimes it was, people were okay with it until they were upset. And then they knew that the person would get in trouble if they complained about it. And I had to deal with that a lot too. And I'm like, okay, this is not an appropriate thing to do on your part. I would have to educate them and say, this is not something, if you were okay with them saying it for 5 weeks in a row, why were you not okay with it this day? Well, and then they would tell me, well, they made me mad because they were supposed to, you know, show up at a certain time at my house and they didn't come over, and now, you know, and I'm just like, we don't use this as retaliation because somebody made you unhappy. This is not appropriate.
Okay.
It's still, and I said, I'm not excusing their behavior. I'm just telling you, we're not using this as a form of punishment for something. Or they started dating somebody else and you got upset with them. And, you know, so this, you had to really, and I'm sitting there, and it's so funny because I would talk to other HR people and I would sit there and say, I say things I never thought I would ever say to people in my life. I have to tell them that this is not, I used to say, if you wouldn't say it to your grandma, and I had to quit saying that because
somebody's grandma. Look at me.
I'm like, to me, my grandmother was a sacred person. You were in your Sunday best. You had to cross your legs a certain way. You had to have your hands in your lap. You had to eat with the right, you know. I mean, my grandmother was you just were more formal around my grandmother, you know. And it was, you know, you had to act a certain way when you were around grandma, and if you didn't, we didn't want to see grandma when she was not happy. So it was something that was different. It was yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. And you know, you were right. I was raised in a different atmosphere, and I was raised to respect my grandparents.
Yeah.
The respect looked different than the respect. So you had to really understand the difference between those two. And, you know, it was a really good experience for me because it helped me when I went back into the corporate world. It really helped me understand how to ask questions and figure out. And I had the truth of the matter was, when people would come and do harassment claims, it wasn't like I was saying, well, why do you think this occurred to them? But I was digging into it further with why it occurred in the first place. What occurred? I had people who would, I had somebody who was from a different culture who literally asked a person out on a date but didn't realize they asked him out on a date. When they wanted to actually go out on a date, and the situation was a very odd one, what had happened was they were not eating something in the appropriate manner. They were using their hands to eat something that they should have used a utensil for in a way. And her response to this individual was, you and I should go out to eat so I can teach you how to eat this. Both people were from two different cultures, because I used to work in a place that we brought in a lot of people who were on visas to work for us, because I worked in tech. So both individuals were from two different cultures. In his culture, he understood it as she was asking him out.
Yeah.
So he came up later and said, you and I want to go out to dinner with you. And when he proposed it as a date, she said, I don't want to date you. And then she got really upset, but he didn't understand what was going on. So she came to me and said, this is very inappropriate, because there was a hierarchy level that was in place. So now I have to deal with it as a sexual harassment claim, because it really was. Because of how he went about doing this, you should go out with me and we should go out. And it felt like he was demanding it of her, and she felt like she would get fired if she didn't do it. So she came to complain to me about it. But when I was going through the process of saying, okay, explain to me everything that happened, she starts with, so we were in a big group of people and he wasn't eating properly, and I told him this. And I'm like, okay,
well, darling,
do you realize you asked him out on a date? It was just like, I immediately was like, I'm not blaming you, but do you understand why he thought?
Yeah.
Out. I had to educate her in the culture of what she had said, because as soon as she said it to me, I'm like, oh, I now know why he thinks
I saw this in different lights.
And then I had to sit down with him and say, you're in a position that is in the hierarchy above the position she was in.
Yeah.
Which means she felt like, I said, it's not appropriate. It's not that we tell people you can't date people you work with, but in your position, you should not be dating people who work for you within your team.
Yeah.
And had to explain how that worked. And then his response was, but she asked me out first. And I'm like, I understand that, but you? And I'm like, I understand that.
It's like therapy and counseling.
So it helped me in that situation, because first of all, you are really scared of asking people for a harassment claim. You are really worried about asking them a lot of questions. But you really have to ask the right questions. It helped me understand the right types of questions to start asking in this situation. What would have happened in that situation? I wouldn't have known that from her in the beginning, and would have been able to help her where it was coming from a little bit better. I would have heard it from him, and then I would have had to gone back to her, and it would have been a different thing. Did you ask him out on a date? He thinks you asked him out on a date. And I may not have gotten the information in the innocent manner in which I did. It may have been more defensive in an answer, or I may not have gotten that information, and we may have never known the situation. And we may have harshly penalized him in the situation, because we may have never gotten that true answer. Whereas it being something where we had them go through training, we had them go through special training that we had for the situation so they better understand. And as a manager, we actually had him go through a separate training again. So we had everybody go through a special training to understand what's appropriate and what's not. It was something that, was a better way to go about this. Nobody lost their positions over it. Nobody was suspended without pay or anything of this nature, because it was a training. And we understood what was happening on both sides, and we may have never known that.
Yes.
So in the sense of harassment, there are some cases.
I didn't think of that. Yeah. Whoa.
So, and I would say you are sensitive to the individual who is sitting in front of you and getting the right information from them to be able to do an investigation. And it is such a difficult thing to deal with and to do.
Yes.
But when you really have a better understanding of everything that's happening and you're able to put those pieces together, we had to separate them. So she moved from his team.
Yeah.
He was taught what to do and what not to do with females and males. I mean, we had to make sure that he knew exactly what it was. He got more intensive training to understand cultural aspects here in the States,
Yes.
as opposed to the cultural aspects from where he was from. She had a better understanding of why she shouldn't have said what she said.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to tell you right now, you were in a group of individuals. All it was going to take was for me to go and ask those individuals, and I would have found out the same information, but it would have made you feel more uncomfortable with what was going on.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm glad that we were able to do this, but please understand, to everybody who was sitting there, you asked him out on a date. And I said, this is what that sounded like to them. So you need to understand the culture of what you just did. And in her culture, it wasn't a date. It was, I'm going to help you become, so with everything, and, I use it as a case study of not everything turns out the way you think it's going to turn out when somebody has a harassment claim.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I was like, oh, this is a horrible situation.
Oh boy.
And I was like, I'm going to have to fire this individual, and he's going to have his visa revoked because, when you fire somebody, it takes a little bit of time, but it does eventually. And I'm like, all these things. And I'm like, in my head, when she's first telling me that, and it's natural to do that, you start to make assumptions of what's going on as soon as somebody's telling you a story. But all it takes is one question to get more information around it. And then you get to where you need to go. And working with people in a behavioral manner, it's exactly that way. It's understanding how to ask the right questions at the right time and get that information that you need to make, the assessment that you need, and to utilize it to your advantage, and to understand that I am dealing with a person who fits into this profile. And because of that, I know to adjust my own behavior to make them feel more comfortable in the situation. Yeah. So when I teach something like behavioral selling, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm helping people recognize the behaviors and the cues, and observing, and to become a better observer of everything that's there. And observations are made with your eyes, but they're also made with your ears. So it's really helping people understand how to listen deeper and to get the true answer. And if I didn't have that skill in that harassment situation,
you would have fired him at once.
I definitely not. I was listening at a different level. I was listening to know what I needed to do next, and listening to understand the situation, and listening to get the deeper meaning behind everything. So going back to it, yeah, you really do need to know the whys behind everything.
yeah, you do.
Know the whys behind everything. And throughout my career, I've just always naturally done that. I've always wanted to know. I have a curiosity that needs to be fed, why somebody does what they do. So.
Ooh, wow, we've learned a lot about HR. Okay, let's run back to finding the why of your passion. I'm going to break this into 2 episodes. One part is HR. Now let's start the other episode on finding your why and putting your passion into your business.
Oh, so I
really love HR.
I do, but what I do is still a part of it. I still get to help people, and that's what I do. And this is part of that as well. It's defining that why. So.
Okay. So
you want to know?
Yeah, how do I find my why? Is there like an activity or like a behavioral sheet I need to use to find my why?
There's a lot of different things. So I am somebody who totally understands that what one method works for you doesn't work for the next person. Okay. So it's about really asking the questions. But something that I usually do when I start with my clients is ask them, if you were to sit down and write your accomplishments down like you were writing 5 years into the future, tell me what you would want, what you would be proud of, what your accomplishments were, what you have done in those 5 years. So
Like
if we were
5
to
years from
fast
now?
forward, yeah, 5 years from today. So if you were to sit down and say, is today the 15th?
Yeah, 15th.
So June 15th, 2025, you sit down and you write about the last 5 years, everything that has happened from June 15th, 2020, all the way through to June 14th, 2025. What have you accomplished? What are you proud of most? What are the things that you learned from? Talk to me about what you would write down 5 years from today. And
Question.
yeah.
So this list I'm writing down, is it all in relation to your business, or more like your personal accomplishment, your personal growth and all that?
Which one do you want to do?
Both.
Do you want to do both?
Both, I guess.
So when you're defining your passion, I can't tell you what your passion needs to be. Okay. So my response is always, what do you want to focus on? What do you want to do? What is it that you're most proud of? So it really allows you to dig deep, and it's a really good exercise to start that process. And from that, when you start telling me the things that you really are going through, and the things that you have accomplished, or things that you overcame, or whatever you decide you're going to write about, that's where I really start helping you understand where it's coming from. So I can't do that unless I know a little bit more about what you're really driving towards. Because usually people are like, in 5 years, I have, a successful business and I have 5 people working for me, or instead of just the one. And, they start to go down those paths. And I'm just like, okay, so what is it that makes you proud about having a team of 5 instead of a team of 1? And then, you really start to focus on those different things and say, okay, so if this is what you're doing, and then you start to take them down the different paths to see the opportunities. So another exercise I really focus on with people is, there's an obstacle in the path, and you have to tell me 40 ways to get around the obstacle.
40?
So I start at 40. Oh, there's hundreds. There's thousands.
That's a long list.
So the reason why we do it that way is because you're opening up your way of thinking to, there are so many different options. Because if you're going to have to overcome an obstacle, most people think in about 3 to 5 ways that you can deal with an obstacle.
Yeah. And
and I start everybody with the first 3 ways. I'm like, you can go to the left, you can go to the right, or you can climb over it. And then yes, and I'm like,
hire somebody to deal with the problem.
You can go under it. So that's most people, and they say, well, I'm going to go over it. And I'm like, I'm going to give you another hint. You can build a trampoline that helps you bounce over it. It's going over it in a different way. So it's a different path now. Because when you jump on a trampoline, you're going to do something different over that obstacle. Maybe you have a rope that's helping you climb over it. Maybe you build a ladder. So you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
It's still the same 3 or 4. You're just becoming more creative about how you're approaching the problem. Yes. And what it does is show you the different paths and opportunities, because when you are looking at something and people are like, well, I need a team of 5, I want a team of 5 in the next 5 years, but I'm not going to be able to do that this year. I ask them, why can't you do that this year? What is stopping you?
Funds, I guess.
Funds is one thing, but if funds are one thing that it is, then I sit down and say, I want you to go and research 10 different ways of alternative funding outside of what you're usually getting right now. Come back to me and talk to me about different things. I'm going to give you a hint. One of them is this. And then I will give them something that they can go and look into a little bit further. So what I'm doing is helping people understand the different paths. Because when they start to say, in 5 years, this is where I'm going to be, I'm like, that's a very good thing. Now let's start to talk about where your passion is now. So I'm showing them the different opportunities. So just like with me, you can tell I'm super passionate about HR.
Yeah, you are
but
very, very passionate about HR.
Exactly. So what I did was I created for myself something that fulfilled my passion completely, and I didn't have to deal with the thing that I didn't want to do anymore.
You're fired.
Yeah, exactly. I never wanted to do that again. So now I get to do what I truly loved in my role, and I don't have to do something I don't love. And I don't have to make an excuse for why I have to do the thing that I don't want to do anymore. And because of that, I defined my true passion. It wasn't far off. It was like building the ladder instead of having the rope to go over the obstacle. It was slightly different, but it was still a different way to get around the obstacle. It's the same type of thing. I just had to open my mind to see the opportunity. And most people, when you have opportunities, you have a fork in the road and you go to the left or you go to the right. And I'm like, I hope people see that there are 40 paths at the fork in the road, not just 2.
Yeah.
This is how you define what. And my path, I was going to the left and I was going in that direction. I just needed to sidestep a little bit more, and that's the path I needed to be on. I just had to find that little. So that's how you define your passion. You know what it is. You know where it lies. Yeah. Why did you start your podcast?
Let's see. I like my voice, number one.
Okay.
And let's see. I guess I wanted to hear from like different people with different experiences, different backgrounds, which would also make me learn a bit more. Just the idea was to come from like a place of like ignorance on a topic and knowing nothing, and have an expert who knows that field talk about it, so that I can learn and others can learn about it. And just sort of like start from zero and just sort of grow, I guess.
But why didn't you go a traditional way? Why didn't you go out and write an article? Why didn't you go out and decide to start a blog? Why didn't you start a Facebook group? Why didn't you do this? You started a podcast for a reason.
I had all the equipment. I had it procrastinated since God knows when. It was like, get your butt to it, Abigail.
You know what? I don't know if I would ever start a podcast. It's not outside the realm of possibility for me, but I don't know if I would ever do that.
Oh.
So, so that's part of your passion. That's part of what defines you. That's part of that fire that's inside of you, that you want, that you have a thirst for knowledge and you want to bring those people in to you in a different way. So when you're defining your passion, you start with these things that seem like they're trite, they're simplistic in the nature of what you're doing, or they're very difficult, like 40 ways to get around an obstacle. But once you start putting those pieces together, you start to be able to explain why you did what you did, or how I found my own passion. I didn't listen to myself for all those years. As I was discussing information to other people, I was saying, if you don't wake up every day with I am so excited about doing this, and it's not like, oh my gosh, you have to jump up and down, but if you don't wake up and say, I get to go to work, or I get to do this today, then you should be redefining what you're doing. And I would wake up sometimes saying, I have to fire this. Usually, so firing an individual is not something that happens that day. Like, you don't wake up with the fact of not firing somebody and fire somebody at the end of the day. Like 99% of the time, it only happens very few times when somebody does something really horrible. And I for years would use the term of, like, if somebody walked through the office naked.
Wait, whoa.
I had to quit using that, because that is just not the right way to go.
Jesus, you have the wildest experience.
Yeah. Well, nobody ever walked through my office naked, but I would say, so if somebody would walk through the office naked, yes, we would fire them on the spot, more or less. We would probably say, yeah, you no longer can come back to work anymore, because this is not
inappropriate workplace behavior.
Yeah. You really don't want to go into those deep things that make people upset or think about, feelings. You want to make them laugh a little bit about it, but you also want to give them the idea of how it works. If somebody steals something, that's another one where you can immediately do it. If they come up and they punch somebody in the face, you're probably sending them home immediately, and then you're going through a very quick investigation, and then you're going to let that person go because they assaulted another individual. You're probably calling the cops at the same time. You're getting the police involved. In some cases you're not. It just depends on what.
Yeah.
In most cases, you probably would get the police involved and have them come out, and then you're not going to have a choice because they have. Yeah, it's an assault. You have to do something.
Yeah.
Outside of those things, if somebody steals something, you still have to do an investigation. You're not firing the person on that day. You're going to fire them.
Yeah, you probably will, but
if you don't fire them, you suspend them, and then you do your investigation and you on. And so 99% of the time, you are not firing somebody on the spot. And even if it's an at-will state, and most of our states are what are considered at-will, you're not. So it's one of those things that when you fire somebody, you're firing them for like a week.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with a week of I have to do this horrible thing.
Fire somebody.
And I oftentimes would do it on a Friday afternoon because I would immediately leave after I was done and like go get a glass of wine somewhere. I can't believe I had to just
fire someone. Like, it just lost a source of income right now. Like, oh, Jesus Christ.
And I hated doing it so much. It was the thing that I hate firing people. I hate having to let people go. I love hiring them. I love helping them solve problems. I hate firing people.
Yeah.
So I needed to listen to what I was actually saying all those years. And I finally woke up one day and listened to it and said, the only way I'm ever going to be able to do this without having somebody else tell me that we're going to have to fire somebody is if I have my own company.
Yeah.
And then I had to explore what that looked like for me. I never wanted my own company. It wasn't like I woke up, as a child and said, when I grow up, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have my own company. I never knew that was something that I was passionate about. I finally realized it was something I was passionate about. And with the whole COVID thing that was happening, you kind of get especially since I am newer in my business. I've had my business and it's still in that infancy part. In the first 5 years of a business, you still have this, am I going to make it? What am I doing? Am I doing the right things?
Yes, you're still kind of stumbling around and trying things.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where even during COVID, I was like, I am going to keep doing things to make my business successful. And I'm going to, I hate the word pivot right now because everybody uses pivot, but I had to pivot myself into something else. At the beginning of the year, I had a goal that I set to speak 36 times in a public setting. Well, I had to retool that goal to do something like this, which I would have never done.
Yeah.
So I would have never put myself out there to be on a podcast because I didn't know that was something I could do. Oh. And you are my 4th podcast out of 8 that are scheduled. I think 8. I'm like counting through. So it's something that I'm super excited about. And I didn't know I even wanted to do something like this, and I wouldn't have opened up that opportunity for myself. But to speak 36 times this year, I have to do it virtually.
Yes. There's no physical meeting right now.
So it's one of those things where I had events that were scheduled that got canceled. I was, and this is, so for what I've done, virtual workshops, virtual summits, so virtual speaking engagements, and in-person speaking engagements from the beginning of the year. I'm at and I'm looking at my little goal list because I'm visual and I have a goal list over here. I'm looking at number 18 out of the year, which means in June, 50% to meet my goal, which means I had to do something different to meet that goal.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Yeah, I'm
So,
proud
but
of
I
you.
had to open up what my, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. But I had to really define where my passion was, and a passion for me is speaking to people.
Yeah.
So, in sharing that information with other people, and I had to widen out what those things look like for me, and do it in a different capacity, in a different setting. So it meant not speaking in person anymore, and
Yeah.
I had to retool it to say, I'm not going to be in person this year speaking 36 times, but I am going to be in front of an audience 36 times, which means Facebook Lives. It means, things that I don't like myself on camera.
Oh,
So
why not?
Everybody has their hangups. Me being on camera is an issue. Now, me being on camera like this, I can still see myself. So that's like something that I have to continuously overcome.
Oh.
Me being filmed when I'm speaking in front of an audience is totally different because I forget I'm being filmed.
Oh.
So I know I'm being filmed in the very beginning. So if you have seen it, I'm really shaky in the beginning because I have this thing about being filmed. I don't like it.
Oh.
And it's being live in front of people is totally different for me, because if I make a mistake or there's a hiccup in the process, the memory of the individuals is probably going to be very slight. But if it's being filmed and other people can see it, it means
they can recall it.
where that was. And so it's part of that thing with me. That being said, I continuously keep doing this, but this was not something I would have ever picked out for myself. I would have driven towards all those live events that I'm more comfortable doing, and I wouldn't have stepped outside of my comfort zone. And I wouldn't have defined something else that I actually like doing. And that gave me another piece of my passion. And and said, this is another avenue for you to be able to fulfill that passion. And I could have said, I'm not going to get the in-person events, so I'm not going to meet this goal this year.
Yeah.
And what I did, say, no, that's not me. Huh?
You just have to tweak it and look at it from a different perspective. I would not be there in person, but I could still do this in a different way.
Exactly. So I sat down, and that exercise that I give to other people, 40 ways to get around an obstacle.
Do it for yourself.
So I give everybody a journal, and I have them do that as the first activity in their journal. And then when they get to an issue and I say, have you absolutely done everything that you can do to resolve this issue on your own? Is there no other opportunity or path that you think you can go down right now to get around this obstacle? And as I start saying those words, I can see them thinking, I need to go back to my 40 ways around. Because it's a visual reminder that there's always another avenue to walk down. There's always another lane. There's always another opportunity. There's always another way you can just sidestep just a bit or tweak it just enough, and it might work. And it's that keeping going and keep walking forward and keep trying to figure it out. Many of my clients, I'm helping them work through what their passion is and what they need to be doing and not doing. And one of the things that I have a lot of people who are work in the personal services, so they do like facials, and they're like estheticians and massage therapists and things like that. So if you can't have contact with other people for 2 months,
like no contact,
your business, there's not a whole lot you can do to pivot that business.
Yeah.
With my clients, I was just like, what can you do virtually for your clients? And is there something, you can still provide value to your clients so you keep them engaged? So it was about opening their mind up to, what do you think you can do virtually? I work with photographers as well a lot, to doing senior photos. Think about that.
It's the high risk. You can't risk that.
Yeah, and the whole entire thing is for people to have that gift. Their gift is looking through a lens and finding the moment to capture. So virtually, how do you do that? I've seen it. I've seen people do it virtually.
Really?
So it's pivoting and doing something you don't think is part of your tools kit or your skill set. And it's understanding that you can still do these things in a different capacity. It may not be your favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
This is not my favorite thing to do. I'm doing it. But if given the opportunity to go back and speak in front of a live audience and in person and do it without being filmed, of course I'm going to pick that every single time. That's my thing. That's where I feel most alive. But this is a close second. So I will start to choose this. And this is something that I will continue to have as part of my toolkit now. This is something that I will continue to do, which I would have never known.
Yeah.
So even this horrible thing that was happening to the world gave other people opportunities and different things to do. And for my clients, when you're defining your passion or figuring out how to use that in your business, I'm like, I'm still passionate about speaking. I'm still a person who wants to do that. So how can I continue to feel that passion in a different way? So it just gave me a different way to feel that passion and that type of thing. So when you pivot, I have somebody I'm meeting with, and they were really upset because they were like, I have to do this. And they kept saying it. And it was one of those things. And I said, let's step back and figure out how to fulfill your passion with something you would still like to do, not have to do.
Yeah.
Let's not change everything you're doing. Let's figure out how to get you on a path that helps fulfill your passion without having you hate what's happening.
Yes.
And the reason why they hated it, they had this nice, great, wonderful business plan, but COVID interrupted it.
Yeah.
When no more events could happen, that completely interrupted her business plan. So let's still work within your passion, and let's still figure out what you can do and where you can sidestep, but not completely go.
Yeah.
You're walking to the left. Let's not go to the right. Maybe we're going to take it and push it a little bit towards the right, but we're not going to go walk down the other path.
Yeah.
That's
you
there.
have a business plan. We're not throw the whole thing away. Yeah.
I'm like, and the reason why I say there's 40 paths there, I'm like, between the way you're going and completely turning around and going the opposite direction, imagine there are 40 or 100 different paths in between that, because that's really truly what it is. So maybe you just do what I did. I'm speaking still. I'm speaking to an audience. I'm just doing it in a different capacity. So I still get to do what I love, and I'm still doing it. So I just kind of just moved that needle just slightly. So now this is the path I'm walking down to still meet that goal. And, and it's really helping people figure that out. So once you know what your passion is and you talk through, and I actually give people behavioral assessments to help them with that.
6 pages.
So the 30 some pages of the assessment. And we sit down, but I help you understand what that 34 pages means to you and really help you figure out what that is and why it helps people. A very simple way of explaining it is, if you fit into this profile here and you in your business are following, this type of method for sales. And the method is, let's say you fit into a profile and it's a very small part of the population that actually fit into this profile, but it exists.
Yeah.
They happen to be natural born salespeople because they happen to be very good at influencing and really listening to people and making that, and they're very relational, and they're natural born salespeople. They're the people who are there, and when you talk to them, you probably would say you're probably really good at sales.
Yeah.
And they fit into that. But their fear, the reason why they're really good at all these other things I just talked about is because their fear is rejection. So they're really good at influencing people to get on the same page they are, because rejection is a bad thing for them, so it drives them in a different way.
Ooh.
But if you talk about a sales if you talk about cold calling and you talk about sales funnels, and this is an amazing method, and I'm not knocking the method. I'm saying this is not the right for this individual. Many people are good with doing a sales funnel because it truly does come down to numbers. You have to keep going with numbers and you have to keep talking to people. And it is an amazingly good method for so many people out there. But for somebody who doesn't like rejection, the more they get hung up on, and the more, if they're knocking doors, the more that door gets slammed in their face, or the more that they have people saying no to them, that is eating away at them. So when they get that one person who says yes, they are not 100%. So it's not a great method for them. So we say, even though so many people find success with this method, it doesn't fit with what you need to do. So let's talk about what works for you and use those strengths, understanding your limitations and using your strengths to overcome that. So then we talk about things called warm calls. These are leads that are coming to you of people who are interested in what you're doing. We talk about referrals. You can still hit a numbers game. You're just driving for different things. So instead of meeting 10 clients this week with the possibility of getting 8 to 10 no's out of those people that are prospective clients, meet with 10 people who want to support your business and want to refer people to you. They're going to be your billboard. They're going to be your advocate. This is what's called a warm lead. And now if you meet with 10 people that are going to do that for you, and they're going to send you people, then those people that they're sending to fill that 10 meetings, now you're probably going to have a much higher ratio of yeses out.
Yes.
So that's going to be a better method for you. So it's still a numbers game. You're still meeting with people. You're still touching people and doing all these different things. You're just doing it in a different way.
Yeah.
That's just one example of what you do to understand what your passion is, what your profile is, who you are, and utilizing those strengths in your business. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It does make sense. It does make sense. Oh, I like how like almost everything kind of like ties back into this like psychoanalyzing people. I'm now starting to wonder, if anyone ever told you that you're sort of like looking into their brain?
Yeah, it kind of does. It's, and it's not like I'm doing that, like, but people are like, are you reading people every time you meet them? And I said, my personality profile, who I am, I want to connect with people. So the answer is yes. I'm trying to connect with people.
This is the psychology.
Creepy way. Like, I'm not psychoanalyzing people or shrinking people, so to speak. I'm doing it in a way because I'm listening for those things that I can build a connection with, and then I'm taking that and running with it and saying, let's talk. I want to talk about this, and I am just adjusting just slightly to meet who you are. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not lying. And, and a lot of people, when I talk about behavioral sales, I talk about adjusting to meet the client's needs. Everybody has all the different profiles within their own profile. They're just higher and lower. So you have a main profile that that becomes who you are, that people see all the time. But the other profiles still exist within you in some sort of capacity. All I'm doing is helping you figure out which one to bring forward at the time. It's not like you're lying, not becoming somebody you're not. You're just taking something that usually is a little bit further in the background and bringing it out and connecting the person based on that. And that's it. So for instance, when I worked in human resources, one of the things I had to do a lot is make quick decisions. I had to be able to make decisions very quickly. It happens to be the lowest part of my profile to want to make decisions. It's not my happiest moment when I have to decide something. It's not something thing to do. But when I worked in human resources, if you gave me my profile, I tested really high in it always, that it was part of my main profile. It's because I was doing it all the time. Yeah. I was bringing it forward, and I was utilizing my skill of making decisions and doing it because it was part of what I had to do for my position. Now that I'm not in human resources anymore, and it's not that I don't make decisions for my business. It's just not a main profile, and it's back to being my lowest. It's behind me. But if you put me in a position where I have to make a decision,
Then it comes
I will
back.
make a decision just like that. I'm
Ooh.
bringing that up forward. So, and people, when they would see me in human resources, they thought I was a very decisive, quick decision maker. I'm actually not. But that's what I was bringing forward to them, and that's what they were seeing, because that is, and I can do, I'm capable of doing it. It's just not my favorite thing to do.
Yes.
And everybody has the capability of making a quick decision. It's just not their favorite thing to do. It's just not something they enjoy. They want to take more time to make choices and decisions. I like to kind of digest a little bit more than most people. So when given the opportunity, I will say, let me come back to you with that. But in human resources, you can't do that all the time, so I would have to do it right away. So if you give me something and say, okay, you have to make a decision right now, A or B, I will be able to weigh the options and do it very quickly and say A or B and be able to do that. So I'm bringing that back forward, that piece of me that usually is behind.
Oh.
And I'm saying, but if you say you have the difference between A and B, because I would prefer to weigh the options a little bit more, I would say, can I get back to you in an hour? And then I would go and weigh the options, and I would go through my method of dealing with the information, and I would come back to you and make the choice. So, but if you tell me I have to do it in that moment, I would be able to go and weigh the options and figure out the pros and cons and go through my method of making a decision and say, okay, I'm going to do it. Yes. So it's something that exists. It's something I bring forward, and it's something that I can say happens. So when we're talking about doing things like that, it's something you have the capability of doing. It's something you just don't like to do it. You just don't prefer to do it. You just prefer something else.
Okay.
We're just saying, put that preference aside and bring this forward, because this moment you need to do this because this person requires this from you. You're going to have to do this. So it's a, you recognize that this person wants you to make a quick decision. I'm going to have to do it. And you can recognize it in what they're saying or their behavior. It could be that they're like tapping they're saying, we need to know A or B, and they're tapping their foot. And you're saying, I better make this decision now. I better not ask. And we do these things all the time.
Like subconsciously?
You do it all the time. So if somebody's tapping their foot after they've asked you a question, you know you have to make a quick decision.
Yeah, they're impatient and they hurry.
You know that this is something from their behavior, and you're reading that cue saying, I better tell them an answer now rather than waiting till later. So you don't ask for the later, okay? We do this all the time naturally and don't recognize we're doing it all the time. What I'm saying is, before they start tapping their foot, I'm going to help you recognize they need a decision now by what they're saying to you, what their behavior is, even before they're tapping their foot and giving you that very loud and clear billboard cue, make a decision right now, and help you adjust a little bit quicker. And what happens with that individual is, if you make a decision on the spot, they think that this is a natural thing for you, and you've made a connection with them, and you continue to have that connection with them. And in sales, that connection is everything. Building a relationship. We buy from people we like. If you think about going to buy a car, if you don't like the car salesman, you aren't going to buy from that place.
He's going to rub you up the wrong way. Like,
yeah,
I don't like something about him.
Yeah, but if you like that person, why do you think they want to take you on a car ride? Why do you think they want you to test drive the car that you're looking at?
Test drive the car.
It actually has to do with them being in a space with you where they can talk to you about things that aren't about the car. You know, they're getting to know who you are as a person so they can help make a better connection. The good ones do. The bad ones will focus on the car, and I won't. They'll focus on the car and things like that. But based on the types of questions you're asking when you're driving the car, they're getting a better idea of who you are so they know where to focus. So it's not about you driving the car. That's a piece of it. It's about them learning who you are when you're driving the car. So and that's giving them a better opportunity to make a connection with you. So anybody, and that's why they do it. It used to be you could go drive the car by yourself. Now you have to have somebody, and they
You might steal that car. I don't trust you.
Exactly. So it actually is a tactic for them to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah. Random question. Did you study psychology?
So when I was in college, psychology was part of what I did for a little bit of time. But I am a certified behavioral consultant, which means I have studied different behavioral assessments, and I am certified to be able to understand what they mean for people. And over the years, I studied my human resources master certification through Cornell, and I studied behavioral interviewing at that time. So the answer is yes, but not, I don't have a psychology degree. So I did it in different capacity. Yeah. So I have studied people for years, and I've always been interested in why people do what they do. So that has always been a question of, well, why did the person do what they did? Why is the person not performing when we know they have the skill set to perform? Yeah. So what has happened in this situation? Like a lot of times when somebody's not performing, I'm like, so when did they start not performing? Okay, what happened around that time period? Oh, we took a project away from them. All right.
The moral certainly went down.
Why did you take a project away from them? Well, we lost funding. Okay, so they lost the thing that's driving them. You know, we need to give them something that engages them again. We need them to be in charge of something. Give them something like this to be in charge of. It doesn't have to be a new project. It has to be, you guys are going to do a team building event. Make them in charge of the team building event, and I bet they become re-engaged. They say, okay, this is what they did. One time I had somebody be in charge of, they wanted to do a newsletter from the team, and I said, make them the editor. And they came back, and it was like months later, and they are like a new person. And I said, they just needed to be in charge of something. And because we took the project away, we gave them another project.
Give them something. Yeah. Ooh.
So it's what occurred when they stopped performing, to figure out why it occurred so we can solve the problem. And in some cases, it's, okay, they're not performing because now they report to you instead of this other individual. So now we have to figure out how to put them on a plan so they perform for you, those type of things. We're not going to switch the manager in this case. So let's.
Yeah, and I don't feel it.
Yeah, so it's all about defining the why behind what occurred and saying, okay, why don't you two mesh together? And there's a very simple, easy way of trying to figure out how people don't mesh with each other. You do simple activities with each other. It's usually communication. Everything boils down to communication. It really does. So you go say, okay, I think it's communication that's the issue. Let me sit in a room with the two of you and let's walk through something together, and let's figure out the two different sides of it, and let me stop you in the middle and say, okay, so what are you hearing from this person right now as they're saying it? And you stop the conversation as they're talking through an issue that occurred, and you say, what are you hearing from this person right now? What was in your brain at this time?
Yeah.
Well, this is what I was thinking. And the guy was like, oh, that's not what I
say that.
thought. That's not what I said. Yeah. That's not what I was thinking, blah, 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 blah. And then you go through and you say, okay, now do you guys understand where you guys are on to, this is what's happening with the two of you. And, you kind of, it's figuring out what that why is. It's figuring out what it is around the issue that's occurring. And then it's saying, so in the future, you can stop the conversation and say, stop, and I'm like, I'm going to give you permission to say stop in the conversation. And, but say stop, because this is what I'm hearing right now, and I want to make sure I'm on the same page. And I said, there's a good way to do that. And just say, you come back to them and say, from what you just said, this is what I heard. Is this correct? Am I on the right page? So if you guys want to have better communication, you're going to have to figure out how to do that with one another. And, and you're right, it is rude to say stop.
Yeah.
So you don't say stop, but this is what I heard from you.
Yeah.
This is, or, you don't say stop in the middle of in front of other people. You take them aside and say, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page with you. This is what I heard is my responsibility. Is this correct? For years, I used to have a manager that would give me information and I would write it down.
Yeah.
And I would and then I would go and do what they asked me to do.
Yeah.
And what I learned was I need to clarify in writing from them, not just me writing down what it was. I needed clarification from them because what was happening is their mind was working so fast when they were talking. They were going so far ahead in advance that by the time I had written down what they said, they were already changing. They were expecting. And so what I learned, and it took a long time to figure this out, is that I needed to, this is what I have written down and I want to make sure I'm on the same page. Can you please clarify that this is the correct thing?
Yeah.
For me, it was one of those things where I felt like this big, like I was not intelligent enough to understand what
boy.
So it was for me to do, because I would do what I thought they were telling me to do, and then I would turn around and they would say, this is wrong. So it was just like a horrible thing. And I drive towards being a perfectionist. So it was like killing me every time this was happening.
It's killing me hearing it.
So what I did was one day I had somebody who told me, and this was way back when I was in my 20s, and I had somebody tell me one day, you probably should get that in writing from them. Why don't you send them an email and say, this is what I think you expect of me, and have them come back to you and clarify what the expectation is.
Yeah.
And it was the most genius thing that ever occurred, because what was happening was they were changing. And what I realize now, I didn't realize then, but what I realize now is they were changing their expectations based on how they were hearing what they were saying, but they weren't changing it to me. It wasn't coming to me in that communication. But I was giving them the opportunity that after they had changed what their expectation was, it was coming back to me and changed. So even though, and because I would sit there and I would say to them, this is exactly what you said to me that you wanted, word for word. And it was so frustrating to me. And they were like, yeah, but as I thought about it a little longer, and that's where it really clicked with me later on in life, was they actually told me what they were doing.
Yeah.
I didn't capture it at the time because I didn't have that knowledge or expertise around that. I didn't have that understanding to know that when they said, after I let it digest a little bit more, and it seems so simple now as I'm saying it, that's not the exact words they were saying to me, but they were saying it to me in so many words. So what they were doing was changing that expectation based on what they were saying.
Speaking what they're saying.
Back to me. So when I started the whole email thing to them, and I still had to make it I had to make it in the manner of, I want to make sure I have all the correct information, so I'm doing what I need to do for you.
Yeah.
I continued to work for much longer than I would have if I had not figured out that that's what.
You'd probably gotten fired at some point.
I would have left well before I was fired, because I was so frustrated with it. I was so frustrated with what was happening. And, but I worked for the person for quite a bit longer, because, and we had a good working relationship after that. It was, I had to figure out their method of communication, and I had to meet their method of communication, but they also had to understand they had to meet mine. Yes. And me sending that email was forcing them to meet my method of communication. Mm-hmm. So it was both ways. It was a frustrating thing for me. Yeah. But I still figured out that this is the best. I had to meet their method before they met mine. Now, when I talk to managers, I say, you have to meet their method of communication. It's going to work a lot better in your favor if you understand their method and you guys meet in the middle rather than forcing somebody to meet your method.
Yes.
And so there's different ways of dealing with that information. And when I used to deal with a lot of managers, I used to say, this is the hiccup between the two of you. this is what's happening. So you both have to meet in the middle. One has to move a little bit and the other has to move a little bit, and you both move in the same direction. So, and it worked for many different people. So
Clearly it's working
does
out.
that answer your question? Yes. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did. You answered it in some more. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay, so you're a speaker, and then you're also clearly passionate about HR. So if someone wants to work with you, or maybe have you speak at their event or interview you or work with you as a HR person, since your method clearly is working, how can they get to know you better or reach you or contact you, something of that sort?
Oh, yes. So my website is a good way. I have a little question thing, a little thing that you can fill out and reach out to me directly. www. I have to get used to not saying that. thegrowthcoachdenvermetro.com. So
the Coach Denver Metro.
Yes, thegrowthcoachdenvermetro.com is my website. I also have a Facebook page, which is going to be the Growth Coach Denver Metro is my Facebook page. I post all of my events that I'm doing. So not only do I do events for other organizations and speaking and workshops for people and their companies, I actually do events as well on my own, and I do my own public workshops.
Yeah.
So I do workshops with negotiation, behavioral selling. I'm actually going to do a behavioral interviewing one that I'm working on right now. I do networking as well, and I'm trying to think, and team building. So I usually have those out in the public in a smaller sense. But what I do for my clients when I do the workshops for my clients is I focus on what they need for their teams. So if we're going to do team building, I work with you and figure out, we do the assessments, and then we figure out what's needed within the team, and that's the workshop that's created for that team. So it's more specific, and the public one is a very generalized version of it. So it's like, so here's the different pieces, but really, and it helps you understand why you want to do this for your team in a more specific.
Yes.
My behavioral selling is the same way. When I do coaching with people, I do behavioral selling techniques with them. I do a very generalized version as part of the public workshop. So I teach main areas, who you are, how to recognize your clients, and how to adjust the behavior. But in an hour and a half, we don't cover specifically who you are. So
it's a lot to cover within that time.
So, and when you do it with me through coaching, and that's really where I do both. They're really great on both sides. And if I'm teaching something, I'm doing it in a generalized sense, but I'm still giving enough information out that you gain knowledge and understanding around what it is. But you really want to do the one that is specific. Yeah, so during the workshops, unless you have hired me to do a workshop for you and your team, you're not going to get that 34-page assessment. You're going to get a quick assessment that we do in class. I am not giving 34-page assessments out to everyone. We just couldn't do a workshop around that.
Yeah.
Do the workshop specific to you and your team when I have those assessments, but the public workshop just doesn't work that way. So you get a quick assessment. When I'm speaking to people, a lot of times I will speak on a specific subject, whatever it is, managing complex change, leadership, adapting your style to meet your team's needs, all of those things. So the favorite ones, though, that people want to hear me speak about is behavioral selling, negotiation, and I do salary negotiation and contract negotiation. And then managing complex changes or leading a team, adapting your leadership to lead a team through, the changes that are there, uncertain times, things like that.
So at this event,
does that answer?
Yeah. Now that we've talked about the whole behavioral stuff, when you said answer my question, I just think of something else.
That's okay. I was like, I can see that your mind was working. I was like, okay, do you have something else that you need to know?
Yeah. Is this physical
See?
or virtual?
What?
Now the workshops, the coaching, um, and the speaking. I know you said you prefer physical live speaking to virtual, and recorded.
I do. I do virtual workshops. So right now, over the last few months, I've been doing virtual workshops for people, but I do both. So as
Okay.
places are starting to open back up and everything, of course, we would respect all social distancing.
Yes.
And what I have been offering to my clients that want to do, I offer virtual as well. So
Okay.
I'll run it on Zoom at the same time as I'm doing the in-person workshop. So, but I also do virtual workshops. Is there anything?
Yeah. At the virtual workshop, are they more productive, more engaging as compared to the physical workshop?
Um, the physical workshop is always going to be more. It's going to be more engaging being in person because I'm able to just really the engaging part is a little bit different and there's more hands-on activities that are there. But worked really hard to make the virtual workshops as engaging. So taking the pauses, making sure that the activities are still there, putting people in separate rooms so they can kind of go through some of the different activities as small groups, like you would. So it's very similar in the engagement. It's going to be a little bit less because like for instance, one of the activities that I do in team building is building paper boats. Well, it's very hard to build paper boats virtually with one another.
Paper
So you
pills.
have to change that activity to something that's paper boats. So folding
Oh,
paper into a boat shape.
oh, I used to make that
So
as
it's an activity that in team building. So they're paper boats, but it takes the interaction of the team members together in the same space to figure out how to fold the paper boats together. So virtually, it doesn't have the same effect. So you adjust it and you do
yeah.
something a little bit different,
Oh,
and you have a different activity as part of it. But in person, that would be the in-person activity, and outside of that, it's a little bit different. So you do a different activity that drives towards the same result that you can do virtually.
and in person, it's within Denver, right?
I actually travel. So my first actual speaking engagement was in the Dominican Republic.
Oh,
I had a window company hire me for their big event that they were having for all their dealerships. So I actually did a behavioral selling and full workshop with them in the Dominican Republic because that was their big event that they wanted to do. So I was their keynote speaker and everything. So I do actually travel,
okay.
but I do focus a lot in the Denver metro area, but I actually travel as well
Okay.
as needed, especially for places that want. I'm never going to say no to going somewhere as beautiful as the Caribbean.
As long as they pay for my trip and everything else, I'm gonna say no.
Yeah, and so yes, I do travel for some of my speaking events that I do, and I travel over. I'll travel internationally as well. So I have no, and to answer a question, I am okay traveling right now with COVID because, I actually am going to take my first trip. So I know most places are not. So I'm taking my first trip over July 4th weekend. So trying to get myself back out doing it again with all the safeguards in place, of course. But want so much to drive towards getting everything back to where we were, with a little bit of a change, but getting us back to
Yeah.
there. So I'm taking my first trip. It's a big thing for me because I am actually a germphobe. So
Oh.
I am the person who's on the airplane who's cleaning everything
Oh.
for COVID. So this is
Oh
going to be a
boy.
big thing for me traveling
Oh
during this
boy.
time. But the only way we're going to get everybody back out there is if people start to do it. So I'm going to have all my safeguards in place. I'm going to have my
stressful
mask
for
and,
you.
and everything. And I'm going to be just, yeah, I believe it. As it's getting closer, I'm getting a little bit more, okay, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be fine traveling. The planes, they're cleaning better. They're doing this, that type of thing. So, I mean, we'll see how it works. I might make it to my trip out, and I might have to drive back. So, but no, I think it's going to be just fine. I really think it's just fine. I was kidding when I said that. No, I think when we were quarantined, I actually followed all the quarantine rules. I stayed in and just getting myself out and starting to do things. And in the past few weeks, I've had multiple clients who were like, can we meet at a coffee shop instead of doing this virtually? And I'm like, yes, we can actually meet in person. I'm super excited about this. So I'm excited about starting to get back into seeing people in person and doing that. And the only way we're going to get back to it is if people start to take that risk and they say, okay, I'm going to put all the safeguards in place and I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to do this and I'm going to show everybody it's okay to do it. So.
Wow. I just went out for the first time today because I was promised lunch.
Oh, yay. That's so awesome.
Without the lunch, I would have gone nowhere.
Yes, we have to get out and start doing stuff. So, yay.
I'm so uncomfortable, though. Like, maintain the 6 feet. Do not come close to me. Do not breathe in my general area.
Which, you know what? It's so funny. And, but you got to get used to doing this stuff again, and you have to get used to going and doing. So,
I like staying at home. I like isolating. I'm actually like, I would rather have conversation virtually than physically. Like, I could stay indoors the whole time and miss nobody. So yeah, going out was like,
I'm more of an introvert, so I am an extrovert, so I need to get out and
I don't want to go anywhere. Because I started staying home since March. Then I went to the office today for the first time in June, and I saw like my calendar was still, you know how you like the calendar that you like this date, just to say March. I was like, whoa, it's been 3 weeks. Yeah, because the last date there was March 17th. Like, yeah, I almost did 3 months straight. Nice.
Oh my goodness. So we did too. So the first time we went out, it was we actually went out in May. So we actually were capable of going out and doing stuff in May, but I pretty much stayed in. But we started quarantining at the beginning of March because we actually visited a location that had an outbreak, and we were asked to voluntarily quarantine because of it. And so we were quarantined a week and a half before we actually went into full quarantine for the city of Denver. And so we actually were off one day from our quarantine. So our time period that we were supposed to voluntarily quarantine and self-quarantine ended on a Sunday. So Monday we were out, and Tuesday is when our city went into full quarantine. So we basically, from the beginning of March all the way through, and I didn't at all, and we stayed in and everything. So it was the end of May when we actually got out and went, and we visited family members that were quarantined the same way we were. So we got out and we were able to visit. So I just need to see people right now.
No. If anybody asks to visit me, I just tell you point blank, no. Like, the only way you get into this apartment is if you come in a full-on hazmat suit. Immediately you get into the door, you're gonna strip down, go to the shower, clean yourself, get a new change of clothes, put it on immediately without touching anything. You will sit down nowhere. I'm not gonna scrub my couch because of you. Like, no.
No, it's one of those things that we kind of broke away from that. And like I said, I have clients who are like, can we meet for coffee in person? And I'm like, yes, we can meet for coffee be in person. So.
Oh my God. I still have my 9 to 5, and my boss is like, Abby, come to work. And I'm like, no. I'm working from home. And it's like, you know what? If you come to work on Monday, I'm going to buy you lunch. It's like, I will be there.
There you go. See, that's so good. We have to get back out. So I am my first trip in an airplane. So
good luck.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. It'll be good to see family. So most of our family live about 1,200 miles away from where we are, or more than that. So we have to really get into a plane to visit most of our families. So, and you know, it's important to go. We had a nephew that graduated, and you know, things like that. So we're going back to celebrate graduation, celebrate a birthday, and you know, and Independence Day and things like that. So it'll be good to get out and go visit and, you know, see people and take that plane trip. So
I don't think I've missed anyone so far. And and my closest relative is 3 countries away. So, no.
Yeah, see, we do a lot of traveling. So we usually travel about 5-6 times a year on average to different places, you know, closer to home or out to different places. So it was kind of one of those things that both of us had trips that were canceled during the COVID because of quarantine. And, you know, it's one of those things that it's kind of hard because we're used to traveling multiple times a year and staying in. So we're really edging to get back out and do things. And with both of us owning our own businesses, that is one of the luxuries of being able just to pick up and go and work from anywhere, because I can do things virtually if needed. And traveling for the different things that I do, a lot of the events that I had submitted for, you know, summits and speaking engagements and things like that were outside of Denver as well, and they were getting canceled because of them being larger events. And so it's like all these things that I normally travel for, and we just haven't. And I'm just ready. I'm just ready to get back out and kind of break into it a little bit and just start getting used to doing it again. So the fear is gone. But like I said, I don't know what I'm going to do when I get to the airport. So I'm just going to make sure that I have all the safeguards in place and following everything that they're telling me to do. And then I actually have spray sanitizer that I can spray on all the stuff. So it'll all be okay. Fine. It'll be fine. We'll just Lysol everything.
You will be. Our lockdown got extended last week, and I'm amongst people who are quite happy about it. When I had the 30 days extension, I was like, yes, no human contact for 30 days. Sign me up.
See, ours is coming out of it. So I think they're starting to open up restaurants and things like that. So we're starting to get back out. So I'm hopeful that they continue down that path. We'll see what happens at the end of this month to see kind of where we are and things like that. But we're hopeful that they start extending the events and things like that. So.
Oh, this has gone 2 hours long. Is there any question I forgot to ask? Is there any question I forgot to ask?
No, I think we covered a lot in this 2 hours. This has been an amazing conversation. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing it and everything. Just if you want to connect directly with me, check out my website, www.thegrowthcoachdenvermetro.com. Make sure the Denver Metro is in there, or you'll get to a different website. And then
make sure the Denver Metro is.
Yeah, so www.thegrowthcoachdenvermetro.com. And then to reach my Facebook page, the same thing. It's facebook.com/The Growth Coach Denver Metro. Okay. So you'll get somebody else's site if you don't put the Denver Metro in there. So
yeah.
But reach out to me directly on both of those places. I have places where you can contact me directly. Like my page, follow my page. All my events go on the page. My first in-person event is scheduled for since COVID is July 13th here. It's called Cocktails and Conversations. It's a networking event. Yeah, it's a networking event that's a little bit different, because in networking, I actually, so you get a little bit of teaching, but it's all about making those connections, and making sure that you're building those connections rather than trying to tell people who you are in your business. So you tell people who you are as a person, and then you introduce what your business is. So we drive towards that. So it should be a very fun event. It's the organization I'm doing it with that is co-hosting it with me is our local Colorado Technology Sales group. That's a meetup group that's there. So we're going to, public is welcome. You're welcome to come to it. It's a free event. And there will be cocktails. There will be some food. And we're going to be having, and hopefully we're going to have it open for July 13th. It originally was supposed to be in April, and we pushed it out to July.
Yeah.
Hopefully July 13th is the day. We may have to push it out a little bit further. But right now, July 13th, it's on my Facebook page. And any of my other virtual events that I'm doing will always be posted on my Facebook page. So thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been great talking with you.
Nice to talk to you as well.
It's been great today. So thank you so much.
No problem.
And I hope you have a great rest of the day and you enjoy the rest of your